former Sony exec calls for shorter games that are cheaper to make. This is a Kotaku article. This has kind of been, this comes up every once in a while. And this time it's Sean Layden, former chairman of Sony Interactive Entertainment Worldwide Studios. He says that he would welcome the return of the 12 to 15 hour game. I would finish more games. First of all, just like a well-edited piece of literature or movie, I've been looking at the discipline around that, the containment of that. It could get us a tighter, more compelling content. It would be something I'd like to see a return to. And I agree wholeheartedly. And it's not just for reasons of editing exists in novels and movies for a reason. And I've played games that definitely seem like they have filler segments or that are paced improperly. But if you get shorter games would kind of help, I think, the current problem that is happening in game development of crazy ballooning budgets and crunch. By making a 12 to 15 hour game with high production values as opposed to, a 30-hour game with high production values, you're inherently automatically limiting the amount of work that needs to be done on it. And you can cut out all sorts of crap in the meantime.
I didn't hit the button there. I think it's interesting. I think this is this almost goes along the lines of the gamers now speaking about this are like the first generation of gamers that have hit their like 40s, we'll just say. We're like, yeah, there were people gaming in the 70s, but that was like a fad and Pong. I'm talking about like people like grew up with the NES that are still gaming today, like a lot of us are. That our lives, we change priorities as we get older. We don't have time to sit home anymore and just play tons of games. Like people have 9 to 5s, and they come home and they can't go through a game that takes 60 hours or 80 hours to complete. It's just impractical. We have responsibilities. People have families. People have other things to do. Well-rounded people. Obviously, there's people that can stay home on a weekend and play for 20 hours. Most people can't do that. So you're also, I think, over time, you are, by making these games that people beforehand know, oh my God, it's going to take me 100 hours to complete this, you are turning some people off, I think, at the same time. Some people might just want a shorter game. I get turned off sometimes when I hear about how much content's in a game. When I hear, oh yeah, Breath of the Wild, you can play it for 300 hours. I'm like, that's great. I'm never going to get to that point.
Or like the new Persona 5 Royale edition that came out. I actually thought about going back to it because I didn't finish the first one, the Persona 5 the first time, because I liked the game. It's good. But the Persona games are RPGs that are well known for having like 120 fucking hours of gameplay in them to get through. And like, that does actually stop me from picking it up, because I go, I'm having a tough time beating this 10-hour game. Like, I'd enjoy the time that I spent on it. It's not wasted time, but I have to start looking at these games that I play and making the cuts to ones that I know I'm just never going to get the money's worth out of.
Yeah, at some point, I think you have to just take a step back. As Layden said, let's see here. The cost of creating games has increased. Some studios show it's gone up 2 times every time a console generation advances. The problem with that model is it's not sustainable. It's not. And miraculously, like as we said, games have stayed at $60 somehow. And yes, they've added microtransactions and DLC. But if you cut down the production time and scope, I think you'll be safer at $60 or less without these microtransaction stuff. I mean, when you talk about GTA, that game came out 7 years ago. There still hasn't been a new one that's come out. And yeah, people are playing the online, but those games take like 4 or 5 years to make a GTA.
Easily.
Like, these are budgets that are well beyond blockbuster movies. These are hundreds of millions of dollars once you get to that point. So these are risky ventures. They have to make sure they make their money back. And yeah, it's like, oh yeah, we want to get as much value out of the game as we can, but I'd rather have something come out maybe more frequently and less of a risk, and then there's less fucking bullshit put on the game. I mean, look how bad Battlefront 2 was regarded because of that partially. Yeah, and yes, that's EA's fault, obviously, for putting in all the bullshit microtransaction stuff. But I don't think people would mind as much if the games were shorter. I think you'd have a lot less people complain than you realize. You'd have a vocal minority say, yeah, I want to play a game for 150 hours. Well, most people don't.
I think you would find a lot of people. I think some people it might take time. The people who actually do get around to like finishing a lot of these, it might be a shock at first, but I think you'd be beating the same amount. You'd be beating more games. You'd be playing more. I don't think there's a real negative, at least to me. I don't see one.
And like I said, if there's less money put into each individual game, then you could have potentially more risky games that you'd be like, okay.
Oh yeah. We're seeing a lot less risk, and we're seeing a lot less games overall.
From AAA,
a lot less risk and a lot less a lot less games overall. If you just look at the number of games that came out on the 360 during its lifespan, and you compare it to what came out on the PS4 or the Xbox One, it's a fraction. It took us 3 years to even get somewhat of a wall of physical titles for those systems up there, because A, people had gone more digital, but B, there just wasn't the same amount of games being released.
It sort of followed the same mold as the Hollywood studio system, where they don't like taking risks anymore.
Sure.
There's a lot less smaller, we'll just say, what's a smaller tier, like 10 to 20 million dollar movies being made. They don't exist anymore. It's either really indie low budget or really fucking huge blockbuster.
Yeah, and that's what we have now.
There's nothing in between where it's like, oh, this could be interesting.
We have teams of 1 to 20, and then we immediately jump to like
700 people.
Yeah, 350 plus.
Where it's like literally bigger budgets than movies and more people than a movie. Let's see. Here's a quote here. Major AAA games in the current generation go anywhere from 80 million to 150 million or more to build, and that's before marketing. These are movie budgets. That's a movie budget. It's a huge upfront cost. Extended over time, it takes 3 or 4 or 5 years to build a game while you're not getting any return on the investment. You just continue to pay into it for the big payoff at the end. I don't think in the next generation you can take those numbers and multiply them by 2 and expect the industry to continue to grow. They can't, because one misstep means your studio's finished at that point, just about.
Yep.
You can't put half a billion dollars of development and marketing into a GTA game, not realizing we're going to make a return on this investment, especially if they're publicly traded companies. You can't do that. You got to make sure. So of course they got to take a step back in this. Of course, it's just common sense to me.
And I think one of the benefits would be, as mentioned in this article, though, is I do think a lot of these games would benefit from some editing.
They're too bloated as is.
They get too bloated. There's a lot of filler content that I personally just don't need, and it's there simply to pad out the game. And it's not there, and I realize they're doing it because I think that people think that there's this expectation. I don't think I've enjoyed the Final Fantasy VII remake, but like every once in a while they'll stop and they'll be like, there's 5 side missions you can do here, help these kids, and it's like, it's all boring bullshit. Like, some of it adds flavor story to it, but some of it's really like they wanted you to stop here and waste 45 minutes to an hour so that it could pad the game out.
That's ridiculous.
And I have a regular customer who, I've mentioned this stuff before, but it's on my mind because I have this regular customer who came in yesterday, and he was talking. He always picks up a bunch of games, and he usually grabs a couple from various systems. And he was just saying that, he was talking about how there are certain games that he likes, but he can only play them on weekends because he gets home from work and he's tired. And, by the time he starts, these games drag so much out that it doesn't feel like you can ever really get a meaningful 1-hour play session in of some of these titles.
It doesn't feel like you did anything.
It doesn't feel like you did anything because everything just takes so fucking long.
Yeah,
like you can't really throw on Fallout. Fallout 4, especially if you've never played it before, and play for an hour and feel like you've really done anything of any merit. And I'm assuming because you're invested in storyline, it would probably be the same for something like The Last of Us Part 2, which I think is kind of the game that triggered this conversation again. It's between 20 and 30 hours, and people say, a lot of it it's just
bullshit.
Just kind of, it's going over and over the same shit over, like,
fetch quests that
torture. I mean, not only is it's the same stuff, but
thematically it's the same thing over and over again.
And it winds people down. But still, even if it was a happy game, there's an argument to be made that some of that can be cut and edited, because the original game, which got great reviews, was about a 15-hour main campaign.
So they almost doubled it.
And critically, they had no reason to think they needed to double it. They just did.
I don't think you're going to get more people to say, well, I didn't buy the first one, but this one's double the length. No, if you like the first one, you're going to buy the second one. It did gangbusters, this game. So, it's weird. I just looked up. I'm trying to compare it to something like books, because books can take a lot of time to get through. There's no book that takes 30 hours to read, I don't think. I looked up one of my favorite books that's a big book. I think it's 700 pages or so. Great Expectations. Classic Dickens. I love that. There's a website, I guess, that tracks how long it takes to read. It takes 6 hours and 22 minutes to read Great Expectations. And that's a long book. That's a long quality book with no filler.
Sure.
And yes, it's not interactive like video games. I get that. But I'm just trying to compare different mediums with each other. Be like, no one would say, wow, I wish Great Expectations took 12 hours to read. No one does that with books.
Right.
A fun book's a fun book. You know when a book goes too long.
Yes.
Oh, you know that. You want to kill yourself because you can't skip it or fast forward or do a cheat code like you do with video games. You have to grind through the book. So I don't understand that how anyone can complain a game's only 30 hours long or only 15 hours long. When you look at the price per, especially with a lot of indie games that are even 15 hours long, they cost like $10, $15. That's a lot of value you get out of there versus, if you're playing a game like GTA 5 for hundreds of hours and you spent $60, I think you got your money's worth. I don't think you can complain at some point. Yeah. Especially since movies now cost $18, $20 to go to, and those are 90 minutes long. And those have actually adjusted with inflation and cost of production.
Right, yeah.
So people complain about that, but I was like, yeah, a movie costs a lot more to come out with. I'll pay $20 to see Endgame for a few hours. That's well worth it. Like, we don't complain about movie costs. Are people actually complaining about video game costs still?
I don't think anyone really does.
Go back to my $60 fucking Three Stooges game in 1989.
Yeah.
That wasn't the value I was looking for. Thick but quick young Pat was not looking for that value there. So anyway, all right. Anything else to add here on this? I think you're good. I think are there that many people out there that can buy multiple 80-hour games in a year and not be fazed by them and just be like, all right, I'm fine.
There are, and I mean,
do they have jobs? I mean, are they trust fund kids?
I know some people have jobs. I'll be honest. If I could actually, and this is getting a little off topic, if I actually had focus. I spend a lot of time pacing around, not actually doing anything because of ADD.
Okay.
But if I could actually focus and sit down and play the games that I bought, I could get through a few 80-hour games a year with the free time.
Most people work like 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
Get home, let's say 10 hours. You cannot be gaming more than 4 hours a night at most. At most.
Are you kidding me?
And getting to sleep and getting up for your job the next morning?
People do it.
They do 5-6 hours a night?
Yeah.
What are they on speed?
Lifestyle gamers, man.
All right, 6 times 4, 24 hours, and then each weekend they're doing probably 10 hours a day. Then
they're living life on microwavable soup and Mountain Dew, whatever.
That's why we can't have universal health care. There it is: long video games and microwavable soup, and your wrap noodles that aren't healthy at all for you but are tasty.
They're slightly healthier than the other ramen I had in my cupboard.
What, like 1,000 less milligrams of sodium in them?
No, like 50 less milligrams of sodium out of 1,000 milligrams.
Yeah, I was gonna say
sodium.
Your water weight is like 70 pounds, right?
Yeah,
it's just bloating up. All right, anything else to add here?
No.